Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I am so excited to be here with you and dive into Chapter 2 on A Joy-Filled Life. Today, we're going to be discussing Follow Your Dreams. And I'm super excited to invite my co-host, Lindsay. Lindsay is out of Denver, and she's a good friend of mine. She has a team out there, and I think last year they closed around 290. And what's interesting is she's building some really incredible things out there. And when we were talking this morning about what we were going to talk about and about this chapter, you know, Lindsay still has some unfulfilled dreams.
Oh yeah.
Unfulfilled dreams. So welcome, Lindsay. By the way, if you guys need ideas for loving on your sphere, she's the girl to ask.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to see everybody and to talk about this book. I've read it. I think this is my fourth time going through it, and it's interesting how impactful and inspirational it still is, even though I've been through it several times.
So, Lindsay, let's just introduce everyone to our ridiculous and transparent and vulnerable friendship here. What unfulfilled dreams do you have, and how is this chapter impacting you as you dive into Mo's wisdom again?
You know, so it's interesting for me. I would say that I'm in personally a transition season, and professionally, while my career has been very successful, thankfully, personally, it's been a rough close to 2 years for me. And so, you know, it was interesting reading this book. I've always felt connected to Mo because we have some similarities. And I think that if you love somebody, you find similarities with whoever it is. But I am a musician as well, and I learned to play piano when I was 4 years old. My father was a dentist, and he had an older man in his late 80s come into the practice, and he needed help with his dentures. He was in very bad shape, and he had absolutely no money, and the only thing that he had to offer was a piano, and it was a very old Steinway. We didn't know until the piano was delivered to the house, but it was cut out of one solid piece of mahogany, and it had ivory keys, which is really rare, and they don't make them like that in many, many years. And it had belonged to his wife, and his wife had passed, and his children had no need for the piano, and it was truly the only thing that he had. And my dad would have given him the dental work without the piano, but he was so proud and needed to feel like he traded something for it. And so I took at-home piano lessons from the time I was 4, and then in high school and college, I used to teach other kiddos when I needed help financially, and I loved teaching kids. So I connected with her on the music piece. There's just a lot in Mo's story that I feel like I connect with. But as far as my dreams, in a way, I think that is the blessing and the curse of a high achiever or a driven person, is the fact that no level of success really satiates that internal drive for more that you have. And there have been many times in my life where people very close to me have said, okay, when is it enough? And my answer is always, I don't know, but I'll tell you when I get there. So there are lots of things that I dream about. I'm not a very materialistic person, although things are what I use for markers of success. So while I'm not a person that needs to have the cars and the houses and all the things, that is how I mark how I'm doing, and it gives me something to drive for. So at this moment, interestingly enough in my life, I feel like my biggest dream is to be happy, very happy. So I've struggled a lot with balance and struggled a lot with sacrificing for my career. And at this point, my biggest dream is to find fulfillment.
Wow. Let me ask you this, Lindsay, how old are you?
I am 36. I'll be 37 in September.
So how long are you willing to wait for your dreams? Because in chapter 2, where is that paragraph? Mo moves in. I had been dreaming of my lovely home since childhood, but didn't get it until I was 73 years old.
Forever. I think I'll wait forever. No, I mean, that was, so to me, you know, you pick up something new with every season of life that you're in as you listen or read things. And for me, again, just being very vulnerable here, putting myself way out there. 2 years ago, I was on top of the mountaintop. I had achieved everything that I ever wanted. My vision board had manifested itself and I had everything. And some personal things happened in my life and it was all dismantled over the last 18 months. So it's a very, you know, those things for me, I felt that when I read Mo's books. They're not just things. They were physical manifestations of my dreams and all of the hard work that I'd put into my life since I was 15 years old. I've worked full time since I was 15 years old. So to lose those things was the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And it's very strange and it feels very first world problems, especially with everything going on in the world right now, to say that losing my big, beautiful house and losing these things that I'd worked for was so hard. But Mo went through that too. So Mo went through a season, and that's what I really grabbed out of the book this time. Mo went through a season where she was on the mountaintop and life kicked her in the butt and they lost everything. They lost their investments, they lost their properties, they lost businesses, they lost everything. And what really struck me this time was how she got back up off the floor. And she even went to, in one of the chapters, I don't think it's the dream chapter, but in one of the chapters, she talks about she has to humble herself and she has to go back to 2 investors who she had lost everything for, essentially, through their investments together. And they had been very harmed by it financially too. And John, one of the investors she talks about in the book, says to the other guy while they're driving to meet Mo, I'm taking a meeting with her out of respect, but I will never put my money anywhere near Mo Anderson again. And lo and behold, they ended up coming together and investing in her market center and in her region with Keller Williams. But the fact that she was able to not only withstand emotionally losing everything that they had built, but to go back with such tenacity and ask for it again and rebuild all of that and then accomplish all of those dreams. And it took a long time for her to get there. And she didn't quit. She didn't throw in the towel. She didn't give up. She just continued to go for it. And that was what really struck my heart. You know, I think, and I've always thought that the difference between success and not success is how many times you can get back up. It's easy to do it once. I had a mentor in the beginning of my career who said to me, good job, you've been successful. Now do it next year and the year after that, and the year after that, and do it again. And then you can actually say you've been a success. But she just kept going. She just took it right in stride and kept going.
So let me ask you this, because as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about the power of the dream that you have inside you. In the Momentum Builders on page 39, you guys, this is where I'm at. So she says, God has put dreams into the DNA of every single person. Find your dreams. If you don't have one, ask God to reveal the dreams inside you. And then the third one is the one that I'm really thinking about. Be willing to connect to your dreams, live them. So what kind of alignment do you think it takes for Mo, and does it take for you to stay connected to that dream in such a way that you never quit?
It's hard. And I think that we have all been in that position at one point or another in our lives where we've looked at ourselves and said, is this worth it? And if you haven't been there, you will be there. I hate to say that, but it can be hard and it can be overwhelming and really frustrating to not see materialization of those dreams faster or as fast, especially for those of us that are high D, really driven personality types that need things to happen really quickly. But I think if the dream is deep enough and if it's the right dream, you don't have a choice. She's 100% correct in that it's biologically imprinted on your soul, and it will continue to drag you whether or not you want to chase it. And that's been something that's really interesting for me. My entire life, I've always known where I'm going, how I'm going to get there, what the next step is. And I was very much thrown off my course personally over the last 2 years. And there's been a lot of internal struggle. And I'm glad that it allowed me to look at my priorities in certain ways, but I can't stop. It's just in there. It doesn't allow me to quit. Even when I say to myself, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know if I want to chase things that much anymore. She's right. It's in your DNA. It's in your heart and your soul. So I think what you have to do is connect to the right dream. And when you are connected to the right dream, you will know because it is always there. You eat it, sleep it, think about it all the time. It doesn't go away. So I feel like people who don't feel that drive or don't feel that passion, they need to really look at what the dream is. Because if it is the right dream that's in your DNA, it will pull you along whether or not you want to go there.
Got it. I was about to ask, and you just sort of answered, what would you just say to someone who doesn't feel that deep alignment or awareness in what their dream is? I know in Bold, you guys know I'm a Bold junkie. We talk a lot about living a life by default. And for my first 40 years, I did. And I'm just now at age 45, really feeling like I'm in alignment with who God created me to be. What advice would you give someone who may not feel that alignment yet or know their dream?
It's really hard. I've struggled too with that big why. I think that it's a pretty idea that you just automatically know what it is that you're supposed to be driving for. But I think that it is deeply ingrained in you and you know what it is, whether or not you're paying attention to it is the issue. So what is it that makes you feel alive? What is it that sets your heart on fire? What is it that is that niggling little thing in your mind that pops up over and over and over again, and you don't really understand where it comes from or why it's there? And oftentimes it isn't even directly connected to your work. For a lot of people, it can be connected to something completely different, and your work is just a means to an end to be able to follow that passion. But I think it's spending time in quiet with yourself, or maybe asking people that are close to you that can see when you light up, when you come across something.
Yeah, I know in my personal experience, sometimes it takes a good friend of mine even observing me. I know Stephanie Chapman, my amazing team leader, is here. This is the woman who believes in me probably more than anyone who's actually not paid to believe in me or related to me. And I know that sometimes when I'm really, really in my energy zone, Stephanie will take me to the side and say, hey, you know what? You need to be doing more of this. And I'll think about it like, you're right.
Yes.
Guys,
and oftentimes it's that scary thing that comes into your head over and over and over again that you push down because you think, I don't want to do that. I could never do that. That would put me too far out there financially. How would I ever achieve that? Oftentimes you look at what is almost painful to think about because it won't go away, but you can't stop it from popping back up.
Well, We want to hear from some of you guys. We're going to be purposeful about ending right on time today because I know a lot of you are enrolled in Bold Pivot. What questions do you have around discovering and following your dream? And do you have unfulfilled dreams? And do you know your dreams? So Lindsay, I think, I know that I've read this before and it's just my very favorite thing in the entire book. And I actually might get emotional.
Me too.
Yep.
That kind of a day.
126. And this is what I love about Keller Williams and and this is why I even wanted to do this book club, because I am fascinated with Mo and I so identify with, for me, coming from a very conservative Christian background, I thought women needed to be, doing crockpot stuff in the kitchen. And I thought that was, I didn't know God created me to be a leader. And so on page 126 in chapter 10, which we'll dive into later, she says, "I'll never forget the feelings I had as I sat on the plane during the return trip to Oklahoma. Fresh tears sprung to my eyes as I thought, I am 55 years old, and for the first time in my life, it's okay to be who God created me to be. This must be how a bird feels when it's first let out of a cage. I had always been driven to achieve on a higher level. It was an exhilarating, affirming moment." Yet when you go back into chapter 2, she has 3 dreams. She wants to get married to an amazing man. She wants to be a music teacher, and she wants to have her dream home. Those were the dreams that were in her DNA that she talks about in chapter 2. And yet later in chapter 10, wow, would you have ever guessed that everything would manifest itself this way? What questions do you guys have?
I have one.
Go ahead, Susan.
Hi. Well, this book, I've read it before, and this chapter really resonates with me because where it says, don't listen to your dream bullies.
Yes.
Well, I have a really big dream. I'm 64 and it hasn't come true yet, but I'm not giving up. But when I was 32, I had cancer and they gave me 6 months to live. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. I've got little children. I'll get through this. So my dreams kind of changed for a while there because my dream then was just to survive. So then I finally got back on track to try to achieve my dream. But my stepmother, God rest her soul, and we had a great relationship, but I'm a dreamer. And she would say to me, and it's funny when people say something to you, she only said it once. And it's the only mean thing she's ever said to me. But it's funny how things stick with you and I can't let it go.
Oh, yeah.
He said to me, "Susan, you live in hope, but you're going to die in despair." That was 25 years ago and I can't let it go. So I just want to know if there's anything I could do outside of being brainwashed to get that thought out of my head.
Again, being really transparent. So Missy and I talked before we started this call today, and I said, I have a feeling this one's going to get really deep and emotional because dreams are so personal. I've had a lot of that in my life. My mom, who I am extremely close with and I love more than anyone on the planet, she, even though I've been very successful in my career, still would prefer that I went back to college and finished my MBA and had a safe and secure job. I've had many people tell me that I want too much, that my expectations are too high, that I will never be able to accomplish these things, that I'm just a girl with no real education or business background. And those things, they do get in there. They absolutely are inside of me. And there's a piece of me that feels like all of the success in my entire career has been working to prove that I deserve a seat at the table, whatever that table is. And so I think that you can come against that either by letting it drive you to succeed against what they've said that you are, or you can internalize it to the point that you allow it to hinder your success. So I don't, as much as hard as it is to hear and as heartbreaking as it is, and as much as you carry that with you, as you go, I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing, because it gives you a little bit of a chip on your shoulder to want to work harder to prove that she wasn't right. But, you know, I've done a lot of work on myself to continue telling myself that I'm not those things. My personal affirmation, and I say this to myself every morning, and I say it to myself multiple times a day when I'm having a bad day, is I am successful and my success is permanent. And to me, that is, someone taught me once about thought replacement. There's an amazing book on it. I can send it to Missy. And basically what it is you're teaching yourself, anytime that negative feedback that you've had from somebody comes into your brain, you're replacing it with something that you choose and that you state is right. And eventually that goes away, because now every time that even pops into your brain or your heart somewhere, it's been replaced so many times with something positive that becomes your anchor instead of that negativity. So every time I would think you're not going to make it, you're not going to make it, I would say I am successful and my success is permanent. And 19 years later, I still have to say it to myself all the time. And sometimes, you know, like as we're going through this coronavirus scare, I've been saying it a lot. It's on my bathroom mirror written right now, because I get so in my head thinking back about that negative feedback that people have given me. So I would say, what is it that she said to you specifically?
You live in hope, but you'll die in despair.
That's nasty. Let's just say that that's nasty. First of all, I hope that we are all self-aware enough that we learn to speak life into people instead of saying things like that to other people as we go through our lives. But I would come up with something anytime that pops in, and it is hard. At first, you're going to have to force yourself. You're going to say, I live in hope, and I'm going to die in despair. And then you're going to have to literally cut it off and say something that triggers you to get out of that. Like, my hope will equal the greatest life that I could ever live. You just choose what is meaningful to you. And in the beginning, you're going to have to do it over and over and over again. But then eventually that voice will quiet and you will start to hear your own voice more strongly instead of hers.
Look again.
I'll send it to you. I have to think of, I know there are two. And I learned about that from a great coach many years ago. But essentially what you're doing is you're training yourself to cut out the lie and tell yourself your truth. And you need to do it over and over and over again until it becomes your truth and her lie goes away.
Great, thank you.
And Susan, I think too, one other thing that's really helpful is, you know, a lot of times we will struggle with something, and when we think we're the only one struggling with that, it makes it harder to deal with. And I think if you ask anyone on here, we all have dream bullies. When I was little, I was that ADHD kid, and that was long before it was cool. And so I had a learning disability and I was crazy and nobody would ever solve a problem like Missy. And those were my dream bullies. And so I think even just knowing that kind of thing, that everybody struggles with it, I think is also valuable. And one thing I would also, on yours with hope, I say this all the time because I'm a visionary and I like to live in that big future instead of in my details. The thing that I tell myself too is hope is not a strategy. Susan, you know exactly what to do to get your dreams. You don't need to hope for it. You just need to work toward it.
And Susan, typically, nothing against your stepmother, but typically when someone has a visceral reaction like that, something inside of you touches her in a way that makes her feel scared or angry or upset. You know, maybe something in your dream made her feel like she didn't go after her own. You know, usually people don't have a reaction and they don't say things like that to people unless there's something inside of them that it bothers. So you have to realize that that probably had absolutely nothing to do with you. It just brought up something for her that hurt her. And unfortunately, human beings are very porous, and we internalize and take on everything that people say to us. And now for all those years, you've probably carried something along with you that was never meant for you in the first place.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way. That makes total sense to me now.
Yep. Susan, that was a great question, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. I know that Mo's intent with this is that we all go internal, and so thank you for your bravery. Chuck, you have an aha that you guys, I love Chuck. He's a good friend of mine here in Oklahoma City, and he inspires me with every conversation. And then Lindsay, we'll come back to you to wrap it up. If you have any other questions, guys, go ahead and put it in the chat box.
You inspire me, Missy Webb. So I'm so thankful for the handout, because it really, by going through the questions, it sets your mind and what to look for and be aware of in the chapter. So thank you for that. And my big aha this week around the dream bullies is I do not have any, except for me. I'm my own bully.
Amen.
I have such a support system in my life, from professional to family to friends to people that don't even really know me through social media, that and it was just the big aha to me is I am my own bully. And so I'm working on that this week.
Yeah, I think that self-sabotage is way more powerful than anything that anyone else could ever do to you. So that has been my work on myself for really the last 2 years, is learning why I do that to myself. Why am I my own bully?
So I had a response to that. Something I heard recently was that if you treat that inside voice in your head as a roommate, you would never allow that roommate to say those things to you, ever. So if you kind of reframe that and treat that inside voice in your head as a roommate, you just speak out against it, and you would never let that roommate talk to you like that. You'd kick them right out of your house.
I love that.
Very true.
Yeah, and Heather, by the way, guys, this is Heather. She's actually the behind the scenes operation on all of this. She's the reason it looks like I know what I'm doing here. So Heather, thank you for all your work. That came out of a book, The Untethered Soul.
Yes, which is
fantastic.
That's one I actually was thinking that Susan and Chuck should both read. That is by Michael Singer. That's an amazing book. It's a little bit tough to get through in the beginning until you get into it, but that book is absolutely amazing.
Yep. Well, Lindsay, thank you for coming on. Everyone, thank you for Stephanie Chapman says, Red Dirt is calling you back. Lindsay came and taught at our market center recently. It was phenomenal. Guys, thank you for being here. We're going to hop off so that people have time to get ready for Bold Pivot. Leslie Peters is joining us on Monday for Chapter 3, Find Your Voice. It's going to be fantastic, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.